back to the channel. More news and interesting stuff about drones. And this week I want to talk first of all about Australia. G'day cobbers from across the ditch. Australia is what they call the Western Island of New Zealand, and it's a little outcrop that was colonised by convicts years ago. But we've forgiven them and now they're our cousins. Anyway, across the ditch in Australia, the airspace regulator, CASA, which is the same as the FAA, they decided drone registration was the thing. Actually, no, it wasn't them, it was the politicians. Politicians decided, oh, we've got to register these damn pesky drones before somebody gets killed. And so CASA announced they were going to require everybody with a drone that weighs more than 250 grams to register it as of, I think it was September this year. Now, as that September deadline drew closer, CASA decided, no, we'll make it next year. Make it next year. So then they said, well, probably about March or April next year, you'll have to register your drones. You've got a few months of respite, a few months of extra breathing space. And okay, fair enough. But then, and I'm sure probably a lot of Australians already know this, but for those who don't, and I'm surprised how many people just don't keep an eye on it, for those who don't know about it, I spied this on the ABC, your national broadcaster.
Starting next year, CASA is introducing compulsory registration of all drones over 250 grams.
We'll be commencing that with people flying commercial drones, large commercial drones, then moving on to the smaller commercial drones. When we've got that bedded down, we'll then move on to recreational drones. That's at this point looking like being more like 2022.
And what that gentleman there from CASA was saying is that they're now pushing out the recreational drone registration until 2022. That's 3 years after its initial, when it was supposed to be initially phased in. 3 years they're pushing it out. Why? Why are they doing this? I don't know. I think I know, and I'll speculate here. I tend to think that basically they bit off more than they could chew. They didn't realise what was involved in doing this, and it's actually turned out to be a really, really big job. On the other hand, in Britain, of course, they said, oh, it's going to be a big job. We need £4.1 million to build a drone database. And so they got the money and they've built a drone database. But their registration is supposed to close at the end of this month. But then now the BMFA in the UK are saying, no, don't register, because the minister associated with these things, he obviously said, hey, I say, this is not jolly hockey sticks and ginger beer, chaps. We can't have children criminalised by the silly regulations. Go back and think again and see if you can come back with something far more practical than requiring children with toy plans to register them. It's just not good at all. So the Department for Transport and CAA in the UK have had to go back and rethink things, and they haven't even started that yet because they're all busy with Brexit. What's Brexit going to do? I don't know. Anyway, we've got politicians arguing and bickering and fighting and calling on the Queen for help in the UK. It's just a giant mess, total mess, so I don't expect much will happen over there. But meanwhile in Australia, they've pushed it out another 2 years, over 2 years, 3 years basically it's been pushed out. So it gives you guys some breathing space. You'll be able to mount some pretty strong case, I think, by then for the fact that drone registration just doesn't work. The evidence from Ireland, from the USA, from all the countries that have introduced drone registration indicates that it doesn't do anything except cost people money and inconvenience them. So yeah, I think we can win this one. And the fact they've pushed it out 3 years, I think that's a pretty good indication that we're on the winning side. So there you go, Aussies, thumbs up to you, mates. And of course, I have made my submission to the New Zealand team that is working on reviewing the regulations here, because one of the options they had was registration, and I firmly put the case no. No, we don't need it. It doesn't serve any purpose. It simply penalises the honest, law-abiding drone user without doing anything to control the bad actors. But if we go back to the UK for a moment, with the drone registration database, a registration database of all drone users, that's a pretty big thing. That's a pretty important thing relating to that database is security. You've got to keep it secure. You can't, if you're going to collect data off people, you must make sure that you look after that data and you don't allow it to fall into the wrong hands, which seems to be a bit of a problem for the CAA in the UK at the moment, because I'm not sure of the details. It's pretty sketchy. I don't know what's happened, but basically a lot of people got an email, seemingly from CAA, which invited them to go and log into a CAA website or some website and hand over their details. It's all a bit fishy. Get it? PHIS, whatever, fishy. Fishy with the PH. Anyway, it's a little bit fishy. And I don't know who's culpable in this, who's to blame, but obviously the people that sent the email out got the addresses from somewhere. Where did they get the addresses from? From CAA users So I'm not going to apportion any blame, but it does point out that it's absolutely critical that if you're going to collect data off hundreds, thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of people, that you store that data in a very safe and secure way. So I would be saying to any country where the authorities are imposing a database of drone users that you demand absolute ironclad security, or you're not interested. I mean, they have to prove to you that they can keep that information secure. Otherwise, I wouldn't be giving it. And if the recent phishing expedition in the UK was the fault of CAA, I'd be deeply worried, but I can't apportion blame because I don't have the details. There's a story on the SUAS news website, which I'll link in the description below. You can go and have a look for yourself. But yeah, a huge burden of responsibility on the organisations that require you to hand over that data. And unless they can provide that guarantee, I'd say no thank you. And if you're in the UK, the BMFA is saying don't register yet at least. And I would be saying the same thing, absolutely. I would advise you not to register, regardless of what happens, but nothing's going to happen until after Brexit. I would say don't register. I'd say if you still want to fly, then fly a sub 250, or it's winter coming, just give flying a break for a few months, because you can use this to your benefit. Now, the beauty of an adversarial democracy is that you have the government and then you have their opposition, the people who want to be government but aren't government. And if the government makes any stuff up, the opposition will pummel them. They'll say, oh, terrible, terrible. And what I think could happen here is if nobody signs up, or very few people sign up to the UK drone database, then the opposition is going to say to the government, you spent £4.1 million on a database that nobody's using. And of course, the public will read this in the Daily Mail. I go, oh, that's terrible. Look, the government's wasted all our money. And the government will have no option but to say, okay, well, we're not going to do it anymore. And then you don't have to register. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. But you've got to use the strength of numbers to your advantage. So I would say don't register if you're in the UK. And if you're in Australia, you won't have to, at least not until 2022. But I think by then, the whole concept of drone registration will have crumbled around the ears of regulators and politicians, and it probably will not be an issue. Now, something else which affects Americans. If you live in America, then this is for you. If you're a model flyer, probably not, yeah, drone flyers as well, but mainly model flyers, especially if you're like thermal soarers or large models or fast models like turbine-powered models. The FAA making some changes which are going to affect you, and those changes are to altitude use. Now, if you are flying in controlled airspace, then you're going to be stuck no more than 400 feet above ground. That's it. That's what the FAA are proposing. A solid ceiling of no more than 400 feet above ground level. No exemptions, no exceptions, no way can you go above 400 feet. You can't basically apply for a permit or anything. No, that's it. If you're a recreational flyer, you're going to be stuck 400 feet and below. If you're outside of controlled airspace, if you're in what they call Class G airspace, then it looks like there's going to be a 700 or a 1200 foot maximum or minimum, maximum altitude based on how far away you are from airports and other factors. So that might be a little bit less of a concern. But again, if you're flying a large thermal soarer, 1200 foot's nothing. It's nothing. And certainly 700 foot is absolutely nothing. You can't really have much fun if you're limited to 700 foot with a thermal soarer. So this means that the AMA is sort of a bit upset by this because they had an understanding that the FAA would not be imposing these hard ceilings, and yet they've turned around and basically reneged on that agreement. So I'll put a link to the AMA website. Go there and have a look at their statement on the whole thing. From my point of view, I'm in two minds about this. Yes, I am. I am in two minds.
You're of two minds. You are.
Firstly, one of my three rules, the three and only three rules that I believe for drone operation and RC model operation is do not fly over 400 feet unless you have express permission to do so. So in controlled airspace, it becomes a bit trickier in controlled airspace because there are going to be manned aircraft flying around possibly at low level. And it's controlled airspace, they control it for a reason. It's congested. Usually it's congested. So there's more likelihood of encountering manned aircraft at those altitudes. Therefore, it makes sense to keep models below 400 feet. Now, I can understand if you're one of the disciplines that requires more altitude and your flying field is in controlled airspace, this could be a bit of a pain in the backside. And to be honest and real, if you've got spotters looking out for manned aircraft, you've got plenty of time to come down. It's not really a safety issue if you're flying in an approved field, if you're operating under a letter of agreement with the FAA, but those letters of agreement, they're out the window. This 400-foot maximum ceiling becomes cast in concrete. You cannot get around it. No letters of agreement will get you past that 400 feet. So yeah, from the perspective of someone who loves flying gliders, especially my DLG, and sometimes fast models, I could see this as being a real restriction on the hobby, a real constraint. But from the other point of view, that we want to make safety our number one priority, or at least in the top 20, we've got to acknowledge that sometimes it's not going to be safe to fly above 400 feet in congested airspace. What it really boils down to, I think, is the big problem is that the FAA are basically saying no exceptions. And that is the problem, because in some cases, in many cases, in most cases, it would be safe to do so. This is what happens in New Zealand. If you are flying a model, you're limited to 400 feet above ground level. However, if you are running an event, organising an event, or you have an area where models are regularly flown, you can apply to get an exemption which allows you for, in that specific area or at a specific time, to fly above the 400-foot maximum. And that is notamed to pilots, so pilots are aware. Now, again, I can understand though, if you're flying in reasonably close proximity to an airport, the air traffic controllers don't want to be bothered by a group of model flyers who are going up into their controlled airspace. That's an annoyance, that's a risk factor. For example, if the airport had to be closed for some reason and they had to keep aircraft moving around, or there was something happened and they had to get aircraft into that area where you're flying, then they've got to make sure they've got a way to contact you, and that if you are contacted, you're going to answer your phone or whatever it is, and you're going to get your aircraft models down and so forth. It becomes a very difficult situation. So it may be that Americans just have to live with the fact that if you want to fly gliders, jets, that sort of thing, you're going to have to move into Class G airspace to do so, and find an area that's been designated as a model flying area. It's kind of harsh, and it's going to be a knock to the hobby. You know what I mean? I don't know, what do you do? So I'm not going to say I'm for or against this, because I'm sitting on the fence. Ooh, it's uncomfortable. I'm sitting on the fence. It would be corrugated iron. I'm sitting on the fence, and I'm going to say, you guys make your own minds up. It's your country, it's your airspace. You go to the AMA website through the link in the description, and they've got a thing where you can have your say. You can send a message off to your senator or something to voice your concerns. I think that's a good idea. If you really think that's a bad thing, that the FAA are going to renege on their promise, then go and shove it to them, stick it to them, give them a hard time. Do that. But I'm just going to say, I live in New Zealand. It doesn't concern me. So yay! Sometimes there are benefits to living on the backside of the planet. And that's about all we have for today. So I hope you've enjoyed that. If you did, give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like more informative information about drone rules, regulations, happenings, occurrences, all that sort of stuff, then subscribe to this channel, and that's what you'll get, along with a lot of other stuff. As I say, big catalogue, big back catalogue. Go and look at my over 1,000 other videos where you've got pulse jets, you've got model aircraft flying, we've got epic vlogging, all sorts of... speaking of epic vlogging, be warned, there is an even epicer vlog in production right now. So yeah, beware of that. Coming soon to the small screen near you. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye for now. Oh, yeah, and thanks to my Patreon supporters. I must always thank them. And you're getting a special video in a day or so, because I'm renovating, well, not renovating, I'm actually just tidying up, spring cleaning. It's spring down here in the Southern Hemisphere. I'm spring cleaning the workshop in the studio. So I've already had the water blaster out, given the old workshop a bit of a tart up. And I'm going to take all the chaos that's here, and I'm going to shuffle it. And it'll still be chaos, but it'll be different chaos. And hopefully a slightly more ordered chaos. Can you have an ordered chaos? I don't know. Anyway, the level of entropy is likely to increase. So anyway, you'll be able to see that yourselves if you're part of my Patreon group. Thank you very much. Bye for now.